Admiral Korvac Fest stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The massive ship was 3 kilometers long and painted in the deep purple colors of the Zephian Confederation. Through the wide windows he could see 46 other warships moving in perfect formation around his vessel. It was the largest fleet the Confederation had sent to deal with a human problem. The bridge was busy with activity. Officers with scaled purple skin moved between control stations, their voices creating a steady hum of military efficiency. Lights blinked on dozens of screens showing star charts, weapon systems, and communication channels. The air smelled of the recycled atmosphere that all space vessels used. Mixed with the metallic scent of advanced electronics, Korvac had been an admiral for over 60 years. He had fought in 12 major battles and won them all. His chest displayed the golden medals that marked his victories against pirates, rebels, and other threats to Confederation space. At 230 years old, he was considered young for his rank, but his record spoke for itself. "Sir, we are approaching the Kepler 442 system," announced Lieutenant Vex Morland from the navigation station. The young officer's purple skin was darker than most, marking him as coming from the outer colonies. "The human settlement is on the 3rd planet." Korvac nodded and walked to the central command chair. The chair was large and covered in the finest materials the Confederation could provide. As he sat down, displays automatically adjusted to show him everything he needed to know about the approaching battle. The humans had been a problem for the past 50 years. They had first appeared in Confederation space 200 years ago, arriving in primitive ships that barely functioned. At first, the Confederation had welcomed them. Humans seemed peaceful enough, and they were willing to trade and follow basic galactic laws, but humans had a problem. They reproduced too quickly and they spread too fast. Every few years, new human colonies appeared in systems that the Confederation had not given them permission to settle. When confronted, the humans always apologized and promised to follow the rules. But then more colonies would appear. The colony on Kepler 442c was different. Intelligence reports showed that the humans there were building military installations. They had constructed defensive shields and weapon platforms. Some reports even suggested they were building warships. The Confederation Council had decided that enough was enough. Humans needed to learn that there were consequences for breaking galactic law. Admiral Korvac had been chosen to deliver that lesson. "What do we know about their defenses?" Korvac asked his tactical officer, Commander Zex. Tolan, a veteran with scars from the pirate wars, consulted his screens. "Intelligence suggests they have basic plasma cannons, probably salvaged from old cargo ships. They might have some missile platforms, but nothing that should threaten our shields." "The biggest concern is their defensive grid?" "Defensive grid?" "Yes. Sir, they appear to have built some kind of energy shield around their main settlement. Our analysts think it's based on old Confederation technology, maybe purchased from black market dealers." Korvac laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Humans and their makeshift solutions. They take our old technology and think they can improve? How many people live on the planet?" "Approximately 50,000, sir. Most are in the main settlement, but there are smaller towns scattered across 2 continents." The Admiral studied the tactical display. The planet appeared as a blue-green sphere surrounded by red markers indicating defensive positions. It looked more heavily defended than he had expected, but not enough to worry about. "Sir, incoming transmission from the planet," announced the communications officer. "Put it through." The main screen flickered and showed a human face. The creature looked young, maybe 40 years old, with the short lifespan that humans had. He had brown hair and blue eyes, features that Korvac found oddly primitive compared to the elegant scales of his own species. "This is Governor Pete Collins of the Kepler 442 colony," the human said. His voice was steady, but Korvac could hear the fear underneath. "Admiral Korvac, we know who you are and why you're here. We're prepared to discuss terms." "Terms?" Korvac's laugh was harsh. "Human, you have built military installations without permission. You have violated Confederation law. There are no terms to discuss." A human's face remained calm. We built defenses to protect our families from pirates. The same pirates that your patrols have failed to stop. We have a right to defend ourselves. You have the right to request protection from the Confederation fleet. You do not have the right to build weapons of war. Those weapons have never been used against Confederation forces. They have only been used to protect innocent civilians. Korvac stood up from his command chair. Governor Collins, you will surrender immediately. You will allow my forces to land and inspect your installations. Any weapons we find will be confiscated. Any personnel involved in their construction will be arrested. The human was quiet for a long moment. And if we refuse, then we will take what we need by force? Your settlements will be destroyed. Your people will be relocated to approved colonies. Your leaders will face trial for violations of galactic law. Governor Collins nodded slowly. I understand your position, Admiral, but I have a duty to protect the people of this colony. We will not surrender. Then you have chosen poorly. Korvac gestured to his communications officer, who cut the transmission. The bridge was silent for a moment. Even after all these years, Korvac sometimes felt sorry for the species that opposed the Confederation. They usually had good reasons for their actions, but law was law and order had to be maintained. All ships assume attack formation, Korvac ordered. Begin charging weapon systems. I want a full bombardment of their military installations, but avoid civilian areas if possible. Yes, sir, came the responses from his officers. The Confederation fleet spread out into a formation that had been perfected over centuries of warfare. The largest ships moved to the center, their heavy guns aimed at the planet. Smaller vessels took positions on the flanks, ready to intercept any ships that might try to escape. Support vessels moved to the rear, prepared to provide supplies and medical aid if needed. Weapons charged and ready, reported Commander Tolan. All ships report ready for battle. Korvac looked at the planet on his main screen. From this distance, it looked peaceful. He could see the blue of oceans and the green of forests. It was actually quite beautiful, as human worlds went. It was unfortunate that it would soon be a battlefield. Sir, we're detecting some unusual energy readings from the planet, Lieutenant Moreland said, his voice uncertain. What kind of energy readings? I'm not sure, sir. It's not like anything in our database. The readings are very faint, but they seem to be coming from deep underground. Korvac frowned. Could it be their defensive grid? No, sir. The defensive grid is clearly visible. This is something else. Something we haven't seen before. The Admiral considered this information. Humans were known for their creativity, but they were also known for their limited technology. What could they have built that would not appear in Confederation databases? Keep monitoring those readings, he ordered. If they have some kind of secret weapon, I want to know about it. What Admiral Korvac did not know was that deep in the planet's crust, automated systems had detected the approaching fleet. Ancient computers that had been sleeping for decades suddenly came online. Communication arrays that had been hidden since the colony's founding began transmitting on frequencies that the Confederation had never heard of. The message was simple, but it traveled faster than any known technology. It reached its destination in seconds, crossing distances that should have taken hours. Colony under attack. Requesting immediate assistance. Far away, in the darkness between stars, something very large and very dangerous received that message. And for the first time in 50 years, it began to move. The bombardment of Kepler 442c had been going on for 23 minutes when reality broke apart. Admiral Korvac stood on his command bridge, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. His fleet of 47 ships had formed a perfect attack pattern around the human planet. Purple beams of plasma energy streaked down from space, striking the defensive shields that protected the main colony. Each hit created brilliant flashes of light that could be seen from orbit. Shield strength holding at 60%, reported Commander Tolan from his tactical station. The humans built better defenses than we expected, but they won't last much longer, Korvac nodded approvingly. The humans were putting up a good fight, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Confederation fleet had enough firepower to destroy a small moon. One human colony, no matter how well defended, could not stand against such overwhelming force. "Sir, we're receiving surrender offers from 3 smaller settlements," announced the communications officer. "They're requesting permission to evacuate their civilians." "Denied," Korvac said firmly. "They should have thought about their civilians before they built illegal weapons. Continue the bombardment." The bridge crew continued their work with professional efficiency. Officers monitored weapon systems, tracked energy levels, and coordinated the attack. The familiar sounds of a space battle filled the air. The hum of charging weapons, the beep of targeting computers, and the steady voices of his crew reporting their progress. Lieutenant Moreland was still monitoring the strange energy readings from deep underground. "Sir, those unusual readings are getting stronger. I'm detecting multiple sources now, all coming from different locations across the planet." "Any threat to our fleet?" Korvac asked. "Unknown, sir. The energy patterns don't match any known weapon systems. They might be power generators for their defensive grid." Korvac dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. Humans were clever, but they were not miracle workers. Whatever they had built down there, it could not save them from the combined might of the Confederation fleet. That was when space folded in on itself. The distortion appeared between the fleet and the planet without warning. Space itself seemed to twist and bend, creating a dark area that hurt to look at directly. Energy readings on every ship in the fleet spiked beyond their sensors' ability to measure. Warning alarms began sounding throughout the Eternal Dominion. "What in the name of the ancestors is that?" Korvac demanded, his confident voice cracking slightly. "Unknown phenomenon, sir," Lieutenant Moreland replied, his hands dancing across his control panel. "I'm reading massive gravitational distortions, but they don't match any known technology." The distortion grew larger, expanding from a small dark spot to a tear in space itself. Through the tear, stars were visible, but they were not the same stars that surrounded the Kepler system. It was as if someone had opened a window to another part of the galaxy. "Sir, every electronic system on the fleet just experienced a power fluctuation," reported the chief engineer over the communication system. "All our equipment is functioning normally, but for a moment, everything stopped working." Korvac felt a chill run down his spine. In his 60 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. The Confederation had the most advanced technology in the galaxy. They had weapons that could crack planets and ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks. But this was something beyond their understanding. Then she appeared. The ship came through the tear in space like a predator emerging from its den. She was huge, easily a kilometer long, but her size was not what made every being on the Confederation bridge stop and stare. It was her design. Where Confederation ships were elegant and curved, built for both beauty and function, this vessel was purely functional. She was a long wedge of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No graceful lines, no decorative elements, no indication of the species that built her. She looked like a weapon that had been designed by someone who understood that beauty was less important than effectiveness. "Sensors report on that vessel," Korvac ordered, his voice struggling to maintain its authority. "Sir, I'm having trouble getting accurate readings," Lieutenant Moreland replied. "The hull appears to be made of some kind of metal we don't recognize. I'm detecting massive energy sources inside the ship, but I can't determine their exact nature." "Size? Approximately 1,000 meters long, 200 meters wide. Mass is—" "Sir, this can't be right." "What?" "If my readings are correct, that ship masses more than our 3 largest battleships combined. The density of the hull material must be incredible." Korvac studied the mysterious vessel through his main viewer. No lights were visible on her hull. No communication arrays that he could recognize. No identification markings. She was completely dark except for what appeared to be a bridge section near the front of the ship. "Are there any life signs aboard that vessel?" he asked. "Yes, sir. I'm detecting approximately 300 life forms. The readings are unusual." "Unusual? How?" The biosigns don't match any known species in our database? They're similar to human readings, but stronger, much stronger. Inside the dark ship, Commander Jake Morrison stood on a bridge that was very different from the elegant command center of the Eternal Dominion. Everything here was designed for war. Control stations were built into armored housings. Display. Screens were protected by metal shields. Even the chairs were equipped with restraint systems, designed to keep the crew safe during violent maneuvers. Morrison himself was a man who looked like he had been carved from steel. He was tall and lean, with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His uniform was dark blue with silver rank insignia, but no decorations or medals. Everything about him suggested competence and deadly efficiency. Status report, Morrison ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded ships in battles that most people could not imagine. 47 hostile vessels in standard attack formation, reported Lieutenant Lisa Grant from her position at the tactical station. She was a young woman with red hair and green eyes, but her movements showed the precision of a trained warrior. They're using plasma-based weapons to bombard civilian targets on the surface. Civilian targets? Yes, sir. The colony has defensive shields, but the enemy is targeting residential areas as well as military installations. Estimated civilian casualties are approaching 500. Morrison's expression did not change, but something cold settled in his eyes. Communications, identify the attacking fleet. Zephyrian Confederation, sir. 47 ships including 1 command vessel. They appear to be trying to force the colony to surrender. Have they responded to our arrival? Not yet, sir. They seem to be trying to determine what we are. Morrison nodded once. Very well. Communications, broadcast on all frequencies. Standard first contact protocol. The transmission that reached. The Confederation fleet was in perfect galactic standard, but the voice that delivered it carried a tone that made experienced warriors pay attention. Confederation vessels, this is Commander Jake Morrison of the Terran Defense Force ship Vengeance. You are currently attacking a civilian colony under the protection of humanity. Cease your bombardment immediately and withdraw from this system. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Korvac listened to the transmission with growing disbelief. Terran Defense Force? I've never heard of such an organization. Sir, our database has no record of any human military organization by that name, confirmed his intelligence officer. In fact, our records show that humans have no significant military forces at all. 1 ship, Korvac said, his voice gaining strength as he remembered his superiority. 1 ship against 47. These humans have clearly lost their minds. He gestured to his communications officer. Open a channel to that vessel. The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of the human ship. The man identified as Commander Morrison appeared on the screen, and Korvac felt another chill. The human's eyes were completely without fear. They were the eyes of someone who had seen combat and was comfortable with violence. Commander Morrison, Korvac said, putting authority back into his voice. I am Admiral Korvac of the Zephyrian Confederation. You are interfering with a legal military operation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Morrison's expression did not change. Admiral, the colony you are attacking is under the protection of the Terran Defense Force. The people you are trying to kill are civilians. This is your final warning? Final warning? Korvac laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. Human, you have 1 ship. I have 47. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and I might allow you to leave the system alive. You have 47 ships, Morrison agreed. But Admiral, you are not outgunned. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Eternal Dominion in silence. Korvac stared at the dark screen, trying to understand what he had just heard. The human commander had shown no fear, no concern about facing impossible odds. It was as if he knew something that the Confederation did not. Sir, the human vessel is moving, reported Lieutenant Moreland on the tactical display. The dark ship began to change position. She did not move like a normal vessel, slowly and carefully. Instead, she accelerated with the fluid grace of something much smaller. In seconds, she had positioned herself betway. Admiral Korvac raised his hand to give the order to attack. 47 ships of the Zephyrian Confederation fleet waited for his command. Their weapons were charged and ready. Their crews were trained and experienced. They had fought pirates, rebels, and other enemies of the Confederation for over 2 centuries. "All ships, open fire," Korvac commanded. The space around the human vessel lit up like a star being born. 47 ships unleashed everything they had. Plasma beams thick as tree trunks streaked through space. Particle cannons fired streams of energy that could cut through mountains. Quantum torpedoes, each one capable of destroying a city, raced toward their target. The combined firepower of the Confederation fleet could have destroyed a moon. It could have cracked open an asteroid or melted the surface of a planet. The energy release was so intense that it created its own light show. Turning the darkness of space into a brilliant display of destruction, the barrage struck the human warship Vengeance with the force of 1,000 thunderstorms, and nothing happened. The weapons hit the dark hull of the human ship and simply stopped. The energy dissipated across her surface like water breaking against a cliff. The metal of her hull did not even glow from the impact. She sat in space, completely undamaged, as if 47 warships had not just tried to destroy her. "What? In the name of the ancestors?" whispered Commander Tolan, his voice filled with disbelief, on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. Every officer stared at their instruments in shock. The readings were impossible. No ship could withstand that kind of concentrated firepower. No shield technology in the galaxy was that effective. "Damage report on the human vessel," Korvac ordered, his voice struggling to remain steady. "Sir, there is no damage," Lieutenant Moreland replied, his hands shaking as he checked his sensors again. "I'm reading 0 hull damage, 0 shield loss, 0 energy drain. It's as if our weapons never touched her." "That's impossible. Check your instruments." "I've checked them 3 times, sir. All systems are functioning normally. The human ship is completely undamaged." Korvac felt something cold settle in his stomach. In his 60 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. The Confederation had the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. They had technology that other species could only dream of. But somehow, this single human ship had shrugged off their attack as if it were nothing. "All ships, fire again," he ordered. "Target the same location, maximum power." The fleet fired again, concentrating their weapons on a single point on the human ship's hull. The energy release was even more intense this time. Space itself seemed to bend from the massive amount of power being released. The result was the same. The human ship remained completely undamaged. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Commander Morrison watched the second attack with the same calm expression he had worn throughout the encounter. His crew worked around him with quiet efficiency, their movements showing no sign of stress or concern. "Damage report," Morrison said. "No damage, sir," reported Lieutenant Grant from her tactical station. "Their weapons are impressive, but they're using old technology. Our hull plating was designed to handle much more advanced threats. Energy drain? Minimal, sir. The defensive systems are barely working. It's like being hit by flashlights." Morrison nodded once. "Very well. It's time to respond. Target their command ship. Non-lethal demonstration. Yes, sir. Targeting the enemy flagship's primary weapon array." The human ship's response was nothing like the massive energy display the Confederation had produced. Instead of dozens of weapons firing at once, the Vengeance fired a single beam of energy. The beam was thin, no thicker than a man's arm, and it was almost invisible against the darkness of space. But when it touched the Eternal Dominion's main plasma cannon, the massive weapon simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no fire, no debris. The plasma cannon, which had been the pride of Confederation engineering, was simply gone. In its place was a perfectly smooth crater in the ship's hull, as if the weapon had never existed. "Report," Korvac demanded, his voice cracking. "Sir, our primary weapon is gone," Commander Tolan replied, his voice filled with shock. "It's been completely destroyed." "No, not destroyed. Vaporized. There's nothing left of it." "How is that possible?" I don't know, sir. The human weapon seems to operate on principles we don't understand. It didn't just destroy our cannon, it removed it from existence. Korvac stared at the tactical display, trying to understand what he was seeing. The human ship had fired once, with a weapon that seemed almost weak compared to Confederation technology. But that single shot had accomplished what hours of bombardment from his own weapons could not. All ships, evasive maneuvers, he ordered, scatter formation. But the human ship was already moving. The Vengeance did not move like a normal vessel. Instead of the slow, ponderous movements of a capital ship, she accelerated and turned with the fluid grace of a fighter. In seconds, she had positioned herself among the Confederation fleet. What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. The human ship moved through the Confederation fleet like a dancer performing a deadly ballet. Her weapons spoke in whispers, but each whisper deleted entire sections of hull armor, disabled engines, and turned weapon systems into empty space. The Vengeance was not trying to destroy the Confederation ships. She was dismantling them piece by piece with the casual efficiency of a mechanic taking apart an engine. Every shot was precise. Every target was carefully chosen. The cruiser Iron Fist lost her main engines, leaving her drifting helplessly in space. The destroyer Swift Strike had her weapon systems removed with surgical precision. The battleship Eternal Glory found herself without shields, weapons, or propulsion, but with her crew still alive and unharmed. "What are they doing?" Commander Tolan asked, his voice filled with confusion. "They're showing off," Korvac replied. Grimly, "They're demonstrating that they could have destroyed us all in the first few seconds, but they chose not to." On the bridge of the Vengeance, Lieutenant Pete Harrison monitored the engagement from his position at the weapons control station. "Commander, 17 enemy vessels have lost primary propulsion. 12 have lost all weapon systems. The remaining ships are attempting to retreat." "Let them run," Morrison replied. "We've made our point." But Admiral Korvac, driven by desperation and wounded pride, was not ready to accept defeat. He had spent his entire career building a reputation as an unbeatable military commander. He could not return to Confederation space with news that a single human ship had defeated his entire fleet. "All remaining ships, target the human colony," he ordered. "If we can't destroy their ship, we'll destroy what they're protecting." It was the worst decision he could have made. The moment the Confederation weapons began targeting civilian areas on the planet's surface, everything changed. The human ship's careful, surgical attacks stopped. In their place came something that was far more terrifying. Morrison's expression did not change, but something cold and final settled in his eyes. "They're targeting civilians," he said quietly. "Yes, sir," Lieutenant Grant confirmed. "Enemy vessels are firing on non-military targets, hospitals, schools, residential areas." "Change of plans," Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment. "All weapons switch to lethal force. No survivors." The Vengeance transformed from a precise surgical instrument into something that was far more dangerous. Her weapons, which had been carefully controlled to avoid killing, were now unleashed without restraint. The first ship to die was the destroyer Quick Strike. She had been firing on a hospital when the human ship's attention turned to her. The Vengeance's weapon struck her amidships, and the destroyer simply came apart. Not exploded, not destroyed, but disintegrated at the molecular level. In less than a second, a ship that had served the Confederation for 50 years was reduced to a cloud of individual atoms. The heavy cruiser Brass Hammer lasted 3 seconds longer. Her shields, which had been the most advanced technology the Confederation could produce, proved as effective as tissue paper against weapons that operated on principles their science could not comprehend. Throughout the fleet, Confederation ships began to realize that they were no longer facing a demonstration. They were facing an execution. "Sir, the human ship has changed tactics," Lieutenant Moreland reported, his voice shaking. "She's no longer trying to disable our vessels. She's destroying them completely." Korvac watched in horror as his fleet was systematically annihilated. Ships that had taken years to build and decades to crew were being erased from existence in seconds. The human vessel moved among them like death itself, her weapons speaking in a voice that the galaxy had never heard before. "Send surrender signals," he ordered desperately. "All ships, cease fire and signal surrender," but it was too late. The human commander had made his decision. The Confederation fleet had targeted civilians, and now they would face the consequences. The massacre continued for exactly 4 minutes. When it ended, debris fields marked the graves of 46 ships and their crews. Only one vessel remained, intact, the Eternal Dominion. Her engines dead and her weapons destroyed. In the terrible silence that followed, Admiral Korvac finally understood what humanity truly was. They were not the minor species the Confederation had believed them to be. The silence in space was terrible. Admiral Korvac stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, staring at the tactical display that showed the complete destruction of his fleet. 46 ships were gone. 46 crews that had served the Confederation faithfully were now nothing more than scattered atoms floating in the darkness. The human warship Vengeance hung motionless in space like a dark predator that had finished its hunt. Her weapons were silent now, but the threat they represented was burned into the mind of every surviving Confederation officer. They had witnessed something that should have been impossible. A single ship had destroyed an entire battle fleet. In 4 minutes. "Casualty report," Korvac said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Commander Tolan checked his instruments with shaking hands. "All ships destroyed, sir. Total crew losses estimated at 43,000 personnel. We are the only vessel remaining, 43,000. Korvac had commanded those people. He had given the orders that led them into battle. He had assured them that they were facing a minor threat, a simple human colony that could be easily subdued. Now they were all dead because of his arrogance. "Sir, the human vessel is moving," reported Lieutenant Morlan on the main screen. The dark shape of the Vengeance began to approach the crippled Confederation flagship. She moved slowly now, without the deadly grace she had shown during the battle. It was almost as if she was being careful not to frighten the survivors any more than they already were. "Are they going to destroy us too?" asked one of the junior officers, his voice filled with terror. "I don't know," Korvac replied honestly. "Prepare for boarding. If they want to take prisoners, we will not resist." The truth was that the Eternal Dominion was completely helpless. Her engines were destroyed. Her weapons were gone. Her shields were down. If the humans wanted to finish what they had started, there was nothing the Confederation crew could do to stop them. A communication signal came through the ship systems. The face of Commander Morrison appeared on the main screen. The human looked exactly the same as he had at the beginning of the battle. Calm, professional, and completely in control. "Admiral Korvac," Morrison said, "you will prepare to receive a boarding party. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction of your vessel." "We will not resist," Korvac replied. "My crew surrenders unconditionally." "Good. You will be taken aboard my ship for questioning. Your crew will remain on your vessel under guard." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence once again. Korvac looked around at his officers, seeing his own shock and defeat reflected in their faces. These were experienced military personnel, veterans of dozens of campaigns. But nothing in their training had prepared them for what they had just witnessed. 20 minutes later, a small human shuttle attached itself to the Eternal Dominion. The boarding party that came through the airlock consisted of 6 humans dressed in dark blue uniforms. They moved with the confidence of professional soldiers, their weapons held ready but not threatening. The leader was a woman with short black hair and cold gray eyes. She wore the insignia of a Marine captain and carried herself like someone who had seen extensive combat. "I am Captain Maya Rodriguez," she announced to the assembled Confederation officers. "You are now prisoners of the Terran Defense Force. You will follow my instructions exactly, or you will be shot." The humans took control of the ship with ruthless efficiency. Within an hour, every Confederation officer was disarmed and confined to quarters. Guard posts were established at critical locations. The ship's computer systems were accessed and copied. Admiral Korvac found himself alone in his quarters, waiting to be transported to the human vessel. He used the time to try to understand what had happened. How had humanity, a species the Confederation considered primitive, built weapons that were centuries ahead of anything in the galactic databases? The answer came to him slowly, piece by piece. The humans had been hiding. For 200 years, they had presented themselves as a weak, peaceful species that posed no threat to anyone. They had built colonies in remote systems, far from Confederation oversight. They had avoided conflicts and paid their taxes like good galactic citizens, but all the while, they had been watching and learning. They had studied Confederation technology, tactics, and weaknesses. They had been preparing for the day when someone would force them to reveal their true capabilities. That day had come, and the galaxy would never be the same. Captain Rodriguez came for him personally. "Admiral, you're coming with us. Try anything stupid, and I'll shoot you myself." The shuttle that transported him to the Vengeance was unlike any spacecraft he had ever seen. The interior was purely functional, with no decoration or comfort features. Everything was designed for war, from the reinforced hull to the weapon systems built into the passenger compartment. The human warship was even more impressive up close. As the shuttle approached her docking bay, Korvac could see the details of her construction. The hull was made of some kind of metal that seemed to absorb light. No seams or joints were visible, as if the entire ship had been formed from a single piece of material. Inside the docking bay, he was met by more human Marines. They escorted him through corridors that were wider and taller than those found on Confederation ships. Everything was built on a larger scale, as if the designers had expected to fight. Battles inside the ship itself, the humans themselves were different from what he had expected. They were taller and stronger than the humans he had met before. Their movements were more confident, more aggressive. These were not the peaceful colonists that the Confederation was familiar with. These were warriors. Commander Morrison was waiting for him in what appeared to be a briefing room. The space was large and stark, with metal walls and simple furniture. A large table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by chairs that looked like they could survive a ship-to-ship battle. "Admiral Korvac," Morrison said as the Marines brought him in. "Please sit down." Korvac took the offered chair, noting that it was more comfortable than it looked. "Commander Morrison, I must ask, what happened to my fleet? What kind of weapons do you possess?" "The same kind of weapons that every major power in the galaxy possesses," Morrison replied. "The difference is that we know how to use them properly?" "That's impossible. Our technology is the most advanced in the galaxy. We have weapons that can crack planets." Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Your technology is advanced, Admiral, but it's also predictable. You've been using the same basic principles for centuries. Plasma weapons, particle beams, quantum torpedoes. All very impressive, but also very easy to defend against if you know what you're doing." "And you know what you're doing?" "We've had 200 years to study your technology, Admiral. 200 years to find its weaknesses. 200 years to develop countermeasures." Morrison stood up and walked to a wall display that showed star charts of the local region. "Let me ask you something, Admiral. In all your years of service, how many human ships have you encountered in battle?" Korvac thought about it. "None. Humans avoid military conflicts. They prefer to negotiate or retreat rather than fight." "Exactly. And why do you think that is?" "Because you're a peaceful species. You lack the warrior spirit necessary for military excellence." Morrison laughed, a sound that sent chills down Korvac's spine. "No, Admiral. We avoid military conflicts because we don't want to reveal our capabilities. Every time we fight, we risk showing the galaxy what we can really do." The human commander returned to his seat. "You see, Admiral, humanity learned something very important during our first encounters with galactic civilization. We learned that being underestimated is a tremendous advantage." Morrison activated a control device, and the wall display changed to show images of human installations throughout the galaxy. Korvac saw shipyards hidden in asteroid belts, military bases built inside dead planets, and fleets of vessels that made the vengeance look small. For 2 centuries, we've been building, training, and preparing. We've established bases and systems that don't appear on any galactic charts. We've recruited soldiers from colonies that the Confederation doesn't even know exist. We've developed weapons and tactics that are decades ahead of anything you can imagine. But why? Korvac asked. If you have this kind of power, why hide it? Why not take your place as a major galactic power? Morrison's expression became serious. Because we hoped we would never need to use it. We hoped that we could remain peaceful, that we could avoid the endless wars that plague this galaxy. But some things are more important than peace. Such as the protection of innocent life, the defense of our people, the right to exist without fear. Morrison leaned forward, his eyes boring into Korvac's. Your fleet attacked a civilian colony, Admiral. You targeted hospitals, schools, and homes. You fired on non-combatants. That is something we cannot and will not tolerate. The room fell. Silent, Korvac finally understood the magnitude of what had happened. His attack on the human colony had not just been a military defeat. It had been the event that forced humanity to reveal itself to the galaxy. What happens now? He asked. Now, Admiral, you're going to deliver a message to your government. You're going to tell them exactly what happened here. You're going to explain that humanity is no longer hiding. 3 days after the destruction of his fleet, Admiral Korvac sat in a holding cell aboard the human warship Vengeance. The cell was small but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and basic facilities. It was cleaner and better equipped than many crew. Quarters on Confederation ships. But it was still a prison. Korvac had spent those 3 days thinking about what he had witnessed, the complete destruction of 46 warships. The revelation that humanity possessed technology far beyond anything the Confederation had imagined. The knowledge that his people had been living a lie for 2 centuries. The door to his cell opened, and Commander Morrison entered. The human carried a small device that projected holographic images when activated. Behind him stood Captain Rodriguez, her hand resting casually on her weapon. Admiral, Morrison said, sitting down across from Korvac at the small table. It's time for you to go home. Home? Korvac looked up in surprise. You're releasing me? We're sending you back to Confederation space with a message. You're going to tell your leaders exactly what happened here. Morrison activated the device, and holographic recordings of the battle began playing above the table. Korvac watched his fleet being systematically destroyed, seeing it from angles that only the human ship could have recorded. They'll never believe it, Korvac said quietly. 47 ships destroyed by a single vessel? The Confederation Council will think I've lost my mind. Then you'll show them this, Morrison replied, gesturing to the recordings. Every moment of the battle, every ship we destroyed, every weapon we fired. The evidence is all here. The holographic display changed, showing detailed scans of the Confederation ships both before and after the battle. The images were incredibly detailed, far beyond what Confederation sensors could achieve. How did you get these readings? Korvac asked. We've been studying Confederation technology for 200 years, Admiral. We know your ships better than you do. We know every weakness, every flaw, every design limitation. Morrison stood up and walked to the cell's small window. Through it, Korvac could see stars and the distant blue glow of the human colony they had tried to destroy. Let me tell you a story, Admiral. 200 years ago, humans first encountered the Zephyrian Confederation. We were a young species, barely capable of interstellar travel. Your people welcomed us to the galaxy and taught us about galactic civilization. The holographic display changed again, showing images of early human colonies and the simple ships they had used for exploration. We were grateful for your guidance. We followed Confederation laws. We paid our taxes. We tried to be good galactic citizens. But we also noticed something. What? The galaxy is a dangerous place. Pirates attack trade routes. Criminal organizations enslave entire populations. Wars break out between species over resources and territory. And the major powers, including the Confederation, often do nothing to stop it. Morrison turned back to face Korvac. We realized that if we wanted to protect our people, we couldn't rely on others to do it for us. We had to become strong enough to defend ourselves. The display showed images that made Korvac's blood run cold. Hidden shipyards and asteroid belts, their construction bays filled with vessels like the Vengeance. Military academies built inside hollow planets, training thousands of human soldiers. Research facilities developing weapons that defied everything he thought he knew about physics. "You've been planning this for centuries," he whispered. "We've been preparing for the day when someone would force our hand," Morrison corrected. "We hoped that day would never come. We hoped we could remain hidden, protecting our people without revealing our capabilities. But we forced you to reveal yourselves. Your attack on the colony left us no choice. When you targeted civilian areas, when you decided to kill innocent people to force our surrender, you crossed a line that we cannot allow anyone to cross." Morrison sat back down, his expression becoming deadly serious. "Here's what you're going to tell the Confederation Council, Admiral. Humanity is no longer hiding. We are no longer the minor species you thought we were. We are now an active participant in galactic affairs." The holographic display changed once more, showing star charts that covered half the galaxy. Red markers indicated human bases, colonies, and fleets scattered across hundreds of systems. "This is our current military deployment," Morrison explained. "Over 3,000 ships of various classes, 500 colonies and outposts. Military alliances with 12 other species that the Confederation has ignored or mistreated." Korvac stared at the display in shock. The scope of human expansion was enormous. They had built an interstellar empire while presenting themselves as scattered, independent colonies. How is this possible? Our intelligence networks are the best in the galaxy. How did we miss all of this? Because we wanted you to miss it, Captain Rodriguez spoke for the first time. Every report your spies filed, every analysis your intelligence officers made was exactly what we wanted them to see? Morrison nodded. "We've had people in your government for decades, Admiral. Not spies or saboteurs, but legitimate citizens who happen to be human. They made sure that your intelligence services only saw what we wanted them to see." The implications of this revelation hit Korvac like a physical blow. If humans had been manipulating Confederation intelligence for decades, then everything his people thought they knew about the galaxy might be wrong. "What do you want?" he asked. "Peace," Morrison replied simply. "We want the Confederation to stop threatening human colonies. We want recognition as a sovereign power. We want the right to protect our people without interference." "And if the Confederation refuses?" Morrison's expression became cold. "Then the galaxy will learn why it's a bad idea to make humanity angry." The holographic display showed new images. Massive ships that dwarfed even the Vengeance. Weapons platforms built into asteroids. Space stations the size of small moons, bristling with defensive systems. What you witnessed here was a limited response, Admiral. One ship, operating under strict rules of engagement, trying to minimize casualties while defending a colony. If the Confederation chooses to escalate this conflict, our response will be very different. Korvac looked at the images of human military might and felt a chill run down his spine. The Confederation had always been the dominant power in this region of the galaxy. They had never faced an enemy with equal or superior technology. "You're threatening war?" "We're promising consequences," Morrison corrected. "The Confederation attacked our people. That has never happened before, and it will never happen again. Make sure your leaders understand that." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. "Your shuttle is ready, Admiral. You'll be escorted to the edge of Confederation space and released." As they prepared to leave the cell, Korvac asked one final question. "Why are you telling me all this?" "Why? Reveal your capabilities instead of keeping them secret?" Morrison paused at the door. "Because the secret was always going to come out eventually. Too many humans were tired of hiding. Too many of our people wanted to stand up to bullies like you. This incident just forced our hand. And because," Captain Rodriguez added, "sometimes the best way to prevent a war is to show your enemy exactly what they would be fighting. An hour later, Admiral Korvac sat in a small shuttle heading toward Confederation space. In his possession were complete recordings of the battle, detailed scans of human technology, and intelligence reports that would change everything the Confederation thought they knew about the galaxy behind him. The Vengeance disappeared into the darkness between stars, but Korvac knew she was not alone. Across the galaxy, other human ships were emerging from their hiding places. The age of human secrecy was over. The age of consequences had begun. As his shuttle crossed into Confederation space, Korvac began composing his report to the Council. He would tell them everything. About the battle, about human technology, about the vast military forces that had been hidden for centuries. Some of them would not believe him. They would think he was making excuses for his defeat. But others would look at the evidence and understand what it meant. The galaxy had a new major power, and that power was no longer content to hide in the shadows. Humanity had revealed itself, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Confederation would have to choose between peace and war, between accepting humanity as an equal or facing the consequences of treating them as enemies. Admiral Korvac hoped his people would choose wisely, because he had seen what happened to those who underestimated humanity, and he never wanted to see it again.